All right. Hello and welcome. I'm so excited to have this conversation today. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. It's always a great time when I get to sit down and chat with my good buddy, Pete. So before we jump into this, I will say if you're watching this here live on YouTube, if you will help us out and just hit like on this, that would be extremely helpful. I'm going to probably ask you that again later. So if you just do it now, you don't have to worry about doing it later. That'd be awesome. We're going to spend some time today talking about heading levels in your website and kind of the do's and don'ts and the best practices of those kinds of things. We're going to go completely unscripted here and pull up some live website examples and go through them and see if we can find any issues with them. We got some cool examples for you. So a lot of this is going to be kind of screen share, more workshop type things. So hopefully you guys will be able to leave this with like actionable advice, go out and make the internet a better place. So that's the goal today. We'll see. Me and Pete are liable to get off on a tangent. But for those of you who don't know Pete, Pete owns an agency in the UK. He's also the co-founder of SEO Hive, which is a SEO company that white labels for agencies. He's an all-around awesome guy. I'll quit with the intro. You can give a better intro than I can, Pete. Good morning. How are you doing? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm all good. Thank you. So you've kind of covered all the bases. I run an agency here in the UK called SEO. We support businesses and other agencies and marketing consultants and that kind of thing with some white label services ourselves. I run SEO Hive, white label SEO service. As I said, I've kind of been known, become known as an SEO guy in our community, in our circle, which is quite cool. And I podcast over at Retain FM. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Forgot about the podcast too. Podcast is good, so definitely go check that out. Somebody replied to my newsletter this morning and said, "Can I get a list of all the podcasts you listen to?" Yours was included in there, so definitely worth a listen. So pull that one up. All right, so what we're going to do here is I think we're going to start out by diving into this, but I want to give a little bit of backstory in case any of you forgot the backstory from when I originally posted this, or if you're watching this having never heard about this event at all. So I was doing a little bit of a research project a while back where I was going through tons of agency websites and logging what they have as the H1 on their homepage. And I put up together a blog post you can find on the adminbar.com where, I don't know, I logged like 100 or something agency websites and what their H1 was. During that process, as I was using a little browser extension, which you'll see in this call, to look at all the headings on the page, I noticed 9 out of 10, if not more, websites were having issues with the order of their headings, having multiple H1s, just some not best practices around their heading levels. So I realized this is probably a bigger, this is more widespread than I probably imagined it would. So I thought this would be a really good time to just sit down and talk about this. I don't think any of it's the end of the world. Like if you've made these mistakes, you're not a terrible web developer. It's just something else to add to your toolbox. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of the importance of this from both the SEO perspective and the accessibility perspective, which I think this probably leans on a little bit more. But I think, Pete, what we'll do is I'm going to share a little example here. We'll just jump into the screen share and we'll run through this. I did a little example. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that all right. I got to move a few things around on my end. So I did a little example here inside of a kind of a sitemap tool to explain kind of the hierarchy here of these heading levels. So as we're looking at this, Pete, can you kind of walk us through, we had a quick chat on this. Can you kind of walk us through what we're looking at here?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, if anybody's been in the WordPress editor, you will know you have 6 heading levels. So H1 all the way through to H6, and then you've got paragraphs and stuff underneath that. So what this is showing you, okay, this only goes down to H4, but it's a really good visualization of how you should structure your H1s, your H tags. So every page should only have one H1 tag. That's been the way it's basically been for all of time. There was a very short window in the middle where Google used to allow you to have multiples if you were structuring them in sections, but it scrapped that. So we're back to a single H1 tag on any page. You then break your page up into the structure of your page up using your H2s. So they become like the sections of your page. If it's a blog post, the sections of the blog post. If those sections have subsections, then you turn those into H3s. And if those subsections have subsections, then they become start with H4s and so on until you get down to H6. And if you've gone as far as H6 and you need an H7, you probably need to think about how you're restructuring your content.
Absolutely. And I have another example here where we'll look at something more practical, but I think lining this up kind of like a family tree makes sense. Right? So you have the original set of parents, right? Here's our Adam and Eve at the top of the page.
Yeah.
They can have children, right? And in this example, this parent has 3 different children, right? They're all kind of siblings of each other. They sit at the same level of the hierarchy here. Each of those children can have their own set of children, right? And those are the H3s. But we can't go from H1 down to an H3. A parent can't just have a grandchild without having a child in between. There's all kinds of families nowadays, so we'll just stick to like biologically here. A parent can't have a grandchild without having a child in between. So the same principle applies. We don't want to go from an H1 and jump to an H3 or jump down to an H4 without correcting that order. Is that the way you would explain it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you've got to think that the way Google parses this stuff is it's an algorithm. So it's looking for indicators about what belongs to what. This is on the SEO side of it, but not so much the accessibility side of it. But yeah, it's trying to find identifiers to say, okay, so what's this page about? How's it structured? Where's the relevant content? Now, the reality is that if you've got an H tag out of place somewhere, and by fixing it, you're not going to rewrite your whole SEO strategy. You're not going to, pop up on for some mega competitive term just because you've got your H tags in the right place. That's not what we're saying. However, what we are saying is that in order to access some of the advanced features in the search engine, so featured snippets, for example, Google needs to be able to understand your damn page, right? So if you structure things correctly, you're helping Google. I've spoken before about spoon feeding Google. That's really what you're doing about the content that's on each page in each section, and a whole load of these features may then start opening up to you. So it's not about rewriting it so that you get loads more traffic. It's about actually rewriting it so Google understands more about it, so they can feature you for more relevant traffic, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think we'll dive deep into kind of how important is this, I think, towards the end of this call, because there was lots of questions about that, and there was a lot of pushback in the group too, like, well, this doesn't matter at all. I disagree that it doesn't matter at all, but I also, like you said, it's not going to take you from not ranking to #1 in the search engine results because you get in the right order. The reason I picked this specific program to do this little illustration in is we can flip this view. This view is kind of how I would look at like a family tree, right? That makes sense. This doesn't make a ton of sense to me in the like layout of a page, but I can flip this to this outline view, and now we can kind of see how this content is structured within a page, like you would see it on a page. The H1's at the top, it's the first heading. An H2 is nested underneath that, and there's other H2s at that same level. H2s have H3s underneath them. If there's H4s, they only go underneath the H3s. So if we look at a more practical example of this, I did one that doesn't just say parent and child. So we could look at, like, let's say I was making a blog post about the music I like, right? So the title of the blog post is Music I Like, and I picked 3 genres here: metal, grunge, and classic rock. And then in each one of those genres, I picked some bands I like. So Pantera, Metallica, Slipknot, those are the metal bands. Grunge, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and Nirvana. Classic rock, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and Queen. Now, under some of those, I might want to write some things about specific albums they made. So under some of these H3s, which are the band levels, I have some of their albums. So if we flip this over to the outline view again, we can see kind of more what this would look like on a page. Now, I think to illustrate why this makes such a huge difference, I did whole other drawing that I wasn't going to share, but Pete said it was worth it here, so we'll try it here. This one, instead of music I like, we went with foods I like, and this is a correct example, right? So in this example, I've broken it up to breakfast, lunch, and dinner food. So under breakfast, we have eggs, and nested under eggs, I like fried eggs, right? So that's nested under the eggs. I also like sausage. Under lunch, we have tacos, of course, burgers, sandwiches. Sandwiches give me a turkey or a BLT. Dinner, we have pasta, pizza, or fried chicken. Now, I took the same amount or these exact same things in here, but in this next example, I've broken up the heading levels as I've seen it on some of these websites where I can tell people are using their heading levels for the styling and less about the semantic HTML structure. So if we flip over this one here, we'll see all of this is the same information, and it's the same information in the same order, but I've messed with all the heading levels here. So now this makes my brain explode. This totally makes my brain explode. I have no idea what this is talking about anymore. Does this throw you off like it does me, Pete?
Yeah, this is exactly it. And the reason I said when you showed me this, and I said that it would be a great thing to show on the call, is because this shows you exactly how an algorithm will read this if you get stuff in the wrong place. So how, I know moving breakfast to an H2 tag sounds like such a small change, but you know what? By moving breakfast to an H2 and eggs to an H3, all of a sudden Google understands what breakfast, what foods you like for breakfast. It's that simple. That's why I wanted you to show it, because it really does give a context to it that hopefully might just make a light switch on for some people.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And we're talking about this so far kind of in terms of SEO and Google bots and those kinds of things, but I think where this makes even a bigger difference in user experiences for those people using something like a screen reader. For accessibility, this is a huge thing. The way a screen reader is going to present this information versus this information, when you have somebody that maybe they're not able to see how you've laid this out. I might be able to take this information with this hierarchy and make it look on the page like it makes sense. Like maybe breakfast is an H3, but I have it huge and I have the other things smaller underneath it. And visually, all that makes sense. So somebody that's fully sighted looking at the website would say, okay, well, I totally understand that. But if somebody's using a screen reader, this is kind of what's being read into their ear. And this is a hot mess. I would leave this website immediately.
Yeah, these things are all processed by machines. You're getting the structure right so that the algorithms, the machine, the screen reader, the device, whatever it might be, can present the information effectively. You're dead right. With a few CSS classes and a bucket full of CSS, you could very easily make this structure look like the previous one. But that's only to able-bodied people on a full color device that's processing CSS properly, etc., etc. You really are missing a trick. And accessibility is becoming ever more of a big issue now. And frankly, people are coming to you as a web specialist. You are the expert in this conversation, but if you're doing this for a client. So this is the kind of, I know it's basic, I know it's a bit boring. It's where this work that we do becomes a bit unsexy, but actually you kind of have a responsibility to get it right. And if you can't get it right on your own site, what you're then demonstrating to your clients, et cetera, there's a whole maybe other discussion around that.
I couldn't decide whether I wanted to say when I do this work, it's always sexy or it's never sexy. So we'll just go with, let's say I landed both of those jokes. I actually get super excited about these things. I think you can tell from the way I'm excited about this webinar. I do think this is fascinating because it's such a simple thing to understand, especially with some of these visuals here as we look through this. Like, hopefully this got some light bulbs going for people, right? It's such a simple thing to understand. And, we'll talk more about how much it moves the needle, but for accessibility, certainly it moves the needle. This is no harder to do it the right way than it is to do it the wrong way. The wrong way might be a little bit easier just out of pure laziness. Like, well, I like the way the H3 looks here, and I don't want to go change the style of this particular element. So I'll just leave it in H3. So maybe because of laziness, it's a little bit easier, but it's really no more difficult to do this the right way than the wrong way. And if your choice is, I could do it right and have some positives from it, or I could do it wrong and have negatives from it, why would you choose the wrong one if the workload is not much different,
But, well, this is it. But I think the crux of this problem comes down to the reliance we now have on page builders, because look, you and I both have come from a school where we used to hard code everything.
Not me,
there was
yes.
Not you.
No.
Oh. Well, I come from a school where we used to hard code everything, right? There was no page builder. So, we'd have a global attributes part of our CSS file where we would, we would itemize out our H1, H2, H3, H4, H5 tags, for example. But actually, it's no harder just to put those in a class name. And rather than style the H1, H2, H3, you style class heading 1, class heading 2, class heading 3, for example. And then when you actually code them up, you simply put H1 class equals, and then pick the class that you want. So it was easy to do this stuff because you could have control of the styles globally versus the tags. What you now have with many page builders is you normally don't set global styles. You will set the styles on the page. So somebody will just pull in an H1 because it's the one at the top. Then they'll pull in an H2 because it's the one underneath that. And then, but then actually they might want maybe one of those, like, where some people set titles quite close, like subheadings quite close.
Yeah.
Actually then, but yeah, I like the auto style 4 for that. So I'm just going to put that in as an H4. And because you're setting these things on a page by page basis, you can end up with a different set of style rules for every page of your website, which blows your consistency. But and that all of a sudden feels like hard work now to go and fix this. So not all of this stuff with page builders has been good in my opinion. We are coming out of it. Things like Oxygen will let you set global styles. I haven't used Elementor in a long time, so I don't know if Elementor lets you do that. But yeah, that's
and I think the perspective of me coming in, I never built a real website before I was using a page builder. So I know, right? You're just so old, Pete. That's the problem. But over the last, let's say December, a year and a half ago, I started using Oxygen, and that kind of forced me to learn more about HTML and CSS because you had to know a little bit more of that to get around the system comfortably. That took me down a rabbit hole of really trying to learn all this stuff as best as I can. And it was because of that things like this really dawned on me. So the idea that a theme, when you go into your theme customizer and change the style of the typography for the H1, H2, H3, it's styling the ID of, that HTML tag. But really, you need to have separation between the CSS and the HTML of the website. And the way WordPress works and themes work, you don't have that separation as naturally. You can just default to what they already have there and run into some of these issues if you don't know to go back and correct it the right way, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. But I would say that all of the page builders I've come across, even though I haven't used Elementor for a while, all of the page builders I've come across do allow you to set custom classes. So it's not exactly, if you don't know what a CSS class is, that's maybe a different discussion. Just go and Google it.
Yeah. Same thing. I mean, in the block editor, you can add under the advanced tab, there's an additional CSS classes. So you can do it in there. Everything will let you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that. And even if you're chucking this code in something like the customizer, for example, so when you have your classes set, you actually manage those through the customizer. All the tools are there in WordPress for you to do it. We're not talking about going and buying advanced plugins or changing your entire stack from Elementor, if that's really what's ingrained in your business, to something else. The tools are all there. It's just about the process. And I know you've spoken about this loads of times, Kyle, as have I. If you have a starter stack and you can get this put in there, then the job's already done for you. Let's face it.
Right. Absolutely. All right. So here's the risky part of this webinar. We're going to pull up some random websites. We're going to look at their heading structure, and then we're going to try to diagnose any issues. I thought doing this as an exercise might make it easier. If these illustrations didn't already connect, before we say what we think's wrong with them, think in your head, do you spot any mistakes on these? So we didn't prepare any websites. I'm not bringing up any specific ones to point out problems. We're going completely off script here. So Pete, why don't you give me, we're going to look up web developer websites. And the reason I picked that is because if I just go to Joe's Plumbing website, I don't know if Joe made the website himself, he's not going to understand these things. I don't know if Joe had his nephew make the website, definitely doesn't understand these things. At least if I go to an agency website, we can assume pretty safely that this was built by a web professional. They should understand these things, right? So we're trying to increase our chances of seeing some people do it the right way. So to do that, why don't we just type in web design, and you give me a town name, Pete, and we'll just go there.
I've always wanted to go to NYC. Let's do that.
All right. New York City. So we got some high-end things here, right? So we'll grab just a couple from the map pack. I'm going to open up in new tabs here. We'll just go through. There's one. You can see I've done New York City here. So some of these have already been clicked on. That one I've clicked on here. There's one I haven't. Here's another one. Okay. So we got 5 sites here. We'll see how many of them we can spot issues in. So I'm using this little browser extension. It's called SEO Meta in one click. If I remember, I'll put a link to that in these show notes when we're done, but it's a free browser extension. What this does on this first page, it's nice because it gives you some title and description and all those things. But what we're concerned with is the headers here. So we'll flip to this header tab here and scroll through here just on a quick look and see if we notice any mistakes. Now, I think it's worth mentioning, we're not talking about the quality of these headlines. Like, are these effective headline copywriting for headlines for SEO? Let's leave that out of the equation. I think that mixes too many things in here. Let's just stick to a structure standpoint. What are you seeing on this one,
that just the last two, just on that point, the last two H2s include the words view all. This one, in fairness, other than those two view alls, I think my eyes were drawn to that because this one actually seems to follow a pretty good structure. That certainly follows the structure I would certainly put in or class as a big green tick if I'd been building it. So
perfect. We're 1 for 1. Let's see if we can find some with some mistakes. Go ahead.
So for full disclosure, Kyle and I did have a call about this previously, and he's right. We went through about a dozen websites and nearly all of them had issues. What's the bet that now we're doing this live, they're all going to be perfect?
Now we'll find. I have 100% confidence. All right, so here we go. Here's the next one. All right.
Oh, so there we go. Straight away.
Before we say it out loud here, think to yourself, do you see any mistakes in this one thus far? So Pete, we've given them a second here. There's too much of a delay on YouTube for me to use the comments to ding, 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 give somebody a prize. But what do we see here as an obvious issue?
Well, so the obvious one is they've jumped from an H3 to an H2 to an H4. They've missed H3s under collaborative marketing experiences, and what they have a single H1. That's perfectly fine. The rest of the page seems broken into H2s. Again, that's fine. Under the drop, you've got an H3 of the new age UX design, and then you've got an H4, so that does have a subsection. So they know what they're doing, but for some reason on the collaborative marketing experiences, Optimum, Northwell Health, I can't even pronounce that one. Yeah, you can see them. They've missed H3s out there. Now, I don't know whether that's because it's a styling issue or what. It looks like it's something to do. Yeah, it's their portfolio section, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's almost, I would say like 90% of the time this is happening, you can go look at it and say, well, I'm sure they did that for styling. So we have a big, huge headline here. This is the H2 we were looking at. And then these are the H4s down here. So my guess is their style for an H3 headline. In fact, we can go back and see. And big drop, if you're watching, we're not picking on you. We're just you're a random sample. Let's see here. They're not.
In fact, big drop, we love you because you gave us something to talk about.
Okay, so here's what their H3 looks like, and here's the H4. So we can see there's some size differences here. So 90% of the time, I can feel pretty confident saying they picked this as an H4 because they liked the way the H4 looked. And that's going back to the problem of not separating the HTML and the CSS for these instances. It would be more properly done if these were H3s in here, and then they just styled them to be this size.
So just on that, talking about sizes, can you just scroll up? Can we get the H1 and the H2 in there? So the H1's right at the top, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the H1. In fact, H1, we can go in here. We'll see if we can get a size. That's 84 pixels. And this H2 is also 84 pixels.
Right, yeah. So they've styled them to be the same size. So hierarchically, or visually, the hierarchy is that collaborative marketing experiences is the same weight as whatever their headline is at the top.
Yeah.
But go on.
I was going to say, and that's not, you can style these however you want. You could have 15 different styles for H1s. That doesn't matter for SEO or for accessibility. It might make your design look a little funky and not great because of inconsistency issues, but there's no rule saying your H1 has to be a bigger point size than your H2, or your H2 has to be bigger than your H3. There's no hard and fast rule on that.
There's no hard and fast rule on that. And the only thing I would say, and this is, I'm going to put my neck out on the line here, but don't take this as a gospel. Oh, Pete's had this from Google, because it's not true. But my read on this is that, as far as I'm aware, Google's algorithm, Bing's algorithm, are looking for basically how visible something will be. So they will only penalize you if you go much below kind of 10 or 12 pixels with these things in terms of size, because then it's going to become difficult to read, particularly on a high density pixel device. So that you may get some kind of penalization there, but that doesn't necessarily mean to say the H2 has to be bigger than your H3. It just don't take them micro small. That's all.
Right. And for all our accessibility friends here watching, we also have an accessibility overlay on this website. All right, enough about that. Let's go on to our third example here. So we'll pull this up, we'll go to headers, and we'll see if we have any issues on this one. I'm thinking we're going to have some issues, Pete. So we'll give the people watching just a moment to notice a few of these. But I think this is going to be another case where we've probably set our heading levels based on the style we want to achieve, and less about the structure of the page.
Yeah, either that or this person's allergic to odd numbers. Oh no, there's two H3s. I can see two H3s. I can see some more down there. Okay.
Pretty good one. Pretty good one.
As I scanned it, all I could see was H2s, H4s, and H6s.
I approve. So we're going here from an H1 at the top of the page. You do want your first heading, even if you've styled a paragraph to look like a heading, that's okay. But your first actual heading tag needs to be the H1 on the page. They've done that successfully, but they've jumped from an H1 to an H4. So they've jumped from the parent to the great grandchild without having any kids, and without those kids having any kids. And then again, jumped from that H4 to an H6. So if we look at, go ahead.
I was just going to say, can you just scroll down and see where that H6 is? Because
so that's what I was just going to bring. So we have this bringing websites back to life, helping businesses grow, and then website design. So bringing business back to life, there's their H1. I'm just going to use, this is the Hoverify extension. Sometimes it will show me when there's heading levels, and sometimes it doesn't.
Oh, it's down there.
There's their H6 and their H. So
right,
we had an H4 in between somewhere, didn't we?
No, the H4 is the we drive growth directly under New York City.
Okay, so we'll go back and look. Okay, helping businesses grow. There we go. So there's the H1, there's the H4, there's the H6.
No, I'm wrong. That's not the H6. We drive growth, helping businesses grow and drive through web design, digital marketing.
Here, I know what I'm going to do. This is great for live things here. We're going to take a screenshot of this, and then that way I don't have to have the little browser extension pulled down. Come on, computer. And now my computer's just going to freak out on me. Okay, so the H4 says helping businesses grow and thrive. I don't even know where that is. It's not even visible on the page.
It's not visible on the page. So right. So essentially, if you hide something from view, Google does know that. that's the top and the bottom of it. Wow, that's I'm a little stunned by that. So
I was thinking that it could have possibly been something. Sometimes you'll hide and show things based on the device size. So
device size,
something might not work. Maybe they're just hiding it on desktop, and that's why we're not seeing it. But we don't have to spend forever debugging this potential or this example website. But those are some things you could look at.
So just to give you an idea, though, so if you can just scroll down a little bit, so we can see that website design, branding, and digital marketing. That block there, right, there you go. So if you think about what the purpose of the heading is, right? The purpose of the heading is to indicate to Google what the next block of text is going to be about, what the next section of this page is going to be about. So they've decided, you could see from the hierarchy that you had in the extension, that it had put the H1, then an H4, then the H6 of website design and website design, branding, and digital marketing together. It lumped those together, and then the next section started with web design NYC, etc., etc. But actually, what the agency is trying to show you is that this next section about website design NYC, design forward, and results driven is about website design, branding, and digital marketing. So because they've got the structure wrong, Google now isn't understanding this the way that the agency intended it to be understood. Does that make sense?
We're back to this foods I like chart. Like the information is all there, but it's just in a crazy structure that is going to be hard for somebody to understand.
Yeah. I guess the thing is, if you have to drink too much vodka for it to make sense as you really mean it, it's probably not the right way around. Okay.
Absolutely. So there are a few ways. So we could go into debugging some of this a little bit, I guess. So there are a few ways you could lay out this section, right? So let's ignore everything above it. Let's say that this is probably going to be an H2 in this section, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to put an H1 above it. So this is probably going to be a paragraph or a div, or this could be your H2. This could be a paragraph or a div, or even an H3 and just styled differently, right? So there's a couple of ways you can go around this. Now, me personally, I'm trying to think about the content too. So I'm probably thinking of this as an H2, this is a paragraph or a div, and then these as H3s underneath this H2. We're reusing web design, we're reusing digital marketing, we're reusing branding. So you probably don't need these to be a headline anyways, right?
That's it. So that line that's in blue, website design, branding, and digital marketing, that is purely there for design, because the actual titles are in the blocks underneath. Because when Google parses this, hey, guess what? You want to say that this text that's directly underneath web design is about web design. So you need the H above that with then a paragraph of text underneath it. So that blue line, that's my watch deciding to send this website to somebody. But that blue line is purely there as a design aesthetic. It's not there for any other reason. So it doesn't need to be part of that HTML structure. Yeah, a div would be fine. A p tag would be fine. A span would be fine. You know, you can take your pick as to how to style these things, but by adding in that as a heading, because they like the styling of it or whatever reason, just to give it something to target, that's another reason they might have done it. It's actually screwing with the way Google and particularly a screen reader would actually read it.
We've said Google so many times, my mini is waking up here. Yeah, and I think the other point would be this would be different if keyword stuffing was still a viable strategy, right? So if they said, well, I want to fit the word web design in a heading tag 16 times on this page. So I'm going to do it in this little pre-header. I'm going to do it here. I'm going to do it in this one. But Google's not really paying attention to you stuffing keywords into headings at this point.
No, it's not. It's not. It's more, look, you know, Google's trying to give the best content to the user so that it can charge the most for the ads that display on the top of that page. That's what it's trying to do. And frankly, if you get too much of this stuff wrong, Google will just pass over you. It's not going to put any time and effort into trying to understand you or me. It's just going to go and find somebody else.
All right, let's jump into another one here. I think workshopping some of those is a good idea. Just on the fly production note, I think us trying to figure out what we should have done differently is a good idea. All right, so this one's starting off pretty good, Pete. We got an H1, we got an H2, followed by a bunch of H3s. The H3, the last H3 here talks about their portfolio, and then we're seeing probably company names of portfolio work they did. Liking that so far. Unfortunately, now maybe we do have to talk about the content of your headings a little bit when you see something like this. They go back to an H2, going from the H3 to the H2 is fine, but their H2 is just the number 16, which is probably not going to do them any favors. And then we're jumping to 15 years in business. The next H2 is 900 plus projects completed. So without looking at this, we know what this section is, right? But this is definitely not, obviously we have headings out of order and probably not good content for those headings anyways.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that's just using, I'm guessing those things are going to be some of those, jQuery counters that are going to count up to whatever number when you scroll to them. They're obviously a long way down.
There we go.
There you go. There they are. So they're used purely stylistically, maybe to help a jQuery thing target it to make an animation happen. That is not, you don't need to do any of that. That is just, frankly, that's just being lazy to style or to target something. There's no reason why you can't put a p tag or a span or a div or whatever in there and do it another way. Because actually there's a consequential effect that it's now knocking out the structure that your screen reader or Google is going to understand what this page is about.
Yeah, and especially if a screen reader, if somebody's jumping down to heading levels, trying to get through to find the part of the page they want, and the H2 heading they get to just says 16, it's not super helpful. Now, if they wanted that to be a heading in the structure of this page, they could put 16 years in business as the H2. They could wrap that years in business in a span tag with a class and target that and use CSS to make it look the exact same way, but semantically have that HTML more like they're wanting it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can see by the look of your page here that, I know that all of those H4s that are listed at the bottom aren't really children of that H2, which says 30 plus. But because of the way they structured their heading tags, that's the way Google's using these H tags to basically write a contents list about, think of contents at the front of a book. Google's using these H tags to basically index crawl the structure that way. So they've simply knocked that out of kilter because they've decided to use H2 tags for big numbers. That's it.
Yeah. So like you're saying, in case somebody didn't catch that, this H2 is kind of the title of this section, right? And so basically what we're saying is all these tags that are, bigger numbers nested underneath it, smaller headings probably, but H3, H4, H5, H6, those all relate to this H2 that they're nested within. So this title of 30 plus, we're saying that this testimonial has to do with this 30 plus. And if that makes no sense to you, you're right, because it makes no sense to anyone. That's not how this is not how you would explain this to somebody if you were trying to explain it to them, right? But this is what they're telling screen readers, and this is what they're telling spiders crawling the internet and indexing this information.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Google Docs, if you go and structure a new Google Doc, go and create a brand new Google Doc and put heading tags in it, it creates a sidebar down the left-hand side, which follows the structure of your H tags. So Google's even sort of built it the other way around into the tools that they create. And you'd never, if you created a Google Doc and the structure looked like that down the side, you'd probably think something's a little wrong here.
Too much crystal meth for you, Pete. All right, let's try another one here. All right, we'll go. Actually, you know what might be fun, and I didn't see it yet. Let's look at this page and see is there any way we can find any of these issues looking at the page before we look at the tags. And I think there's a reason why we might be able to do it, but you shouldn't be able to do it.
Welcome to Scrolling an SEO, Scrolling a Website Page with Carl Van Dusen and Pete Everitt.
So I'm going to take some wild guesses here, okay? I'm going to say that there's probably some issues in this section here just because of the size of these headings. Now, remember, we can size things. If they've done this correctly, they've sized it, or they've styled it with CSS, and the headings are perfectly in order. But my guess is there's going to be an issue in this section here. This one visually looks like they might have done it right. So I don't know. Maybe this is a fail.
I'm not convinced that these titles at the top of those sections are going to be H2s. So where you've got like web design services.
Gotcha.
They might be. Yeah. I might be wrong with that, but
let's see. Drum roll, please. Okay.
Oh.
So, I told you, we just started off with one that was great. All right. So this one, they have New York, New Jersey. Hello. They got their email address and a phone number as H6s at the top of the page. So this is probably this little pre-header section right here.
Who knew you didn't even have to scroll further than that to find an issue?
Yeah. So Yeah, we no scrolling necessary. So obviously these could be paragraphs, divs, spans, whatever you want them to be. They don't need to be headings at the top of the page. But my guess is they picked those because that was the thing that looked right in their theme. Welcome to Hatton Media Web Design New York. Okay, so we got our H1. H1, remember, it always needs to be the first heading level heading tag on your website. We don't want any H6s before it. Jumping from the H1 to the H5, certainly issues there.
But where is that H5? Because it's not on the blue banner.
We engage with your audience. It's this here.
Well, right. So that's the title of that section, Welcome to Hatton Media Web Design New York, just above that little blue thing, that isn't in an H tag at all.
That's the H1 of the page.
No, I think that's We're Web Design Agency of New York, the top one, isn't it?
Let's fight about it.
The one in the blue banner.
Welcome to Hatton.
Oh, no, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. So the massive text in the banner isn't actually.
They're just divs.
They're just divs.
Perfect.
Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting
and
that.
I mean, that's not a problem. Your hero section doesn't have to have the H1 in it. There's no,
it doesn't at all.
Typically they are, but they don't have to have that H1 in there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right. Typically they are, but I would have assumed, although I didn't assume they'd have H6s in the header either, but I would have assumed that would have been the H1.
Sure. So H1 here, what did we say? This was like
H5,
H5,
or H4 or something.
Let's see. This was the section I thought might be a problem here. So we got small business, web design agency of New York, New Jersey, and then this WordPress stuff. So let's go back and look and see if we can find this here. So there's the H2 is this here. And then we jump to H4 for these three things here. So
there's no reason why they couldn't have been H3s though.
Yeah. Other than they pick those for styling. Again, I just keep going back to that because I think that's probably the most obvious answer to how that happened. You also called out that you don't think that this web design services is going to be an H2 like it probably should be. There's other ways we could work it, but let's see here. Oh, wait. Is this it here? Or
hang on, but that means we've missed all of the, but where's all of the,
where is all of this
stuff? Or is that, if you click on learn more, does that just expand something?
Let's see. No, that took me somewhere else. We'd have to dig into this to find where those have gone.
Well, yeah, that's consultancy they ain't paying for, but
yeah, that's true.
I hope that, it'd be great if somebody was in the comments. I don't know if you can monitor the comments, Kyle, to let us know if we've sort of highlighted the point. They've got another H1. Mate, you're getting me excited about this kind of stuff now.
Oh, look, we got
another H1.
We got a blank H1 coming up. So,
oh baby, it doesn't H tag. What's this? Reviews don't get any better than this. They've got 4 H1s on the page.
4 H1s on the page.
So what that means is if you've written a book and you've submitted it to the Library of Google or the Library of Bing, it's now got 4 titles on the front cover.
It's like we're not split testing this here. Probably just need one title.
Yeah, absolutely. You just need one title. It's like Kyle's example of having breakfast, lunch, and dinner all at the same time. Now,
right, which sometimes I do.
Yeah. But
well, I'm trying to catch up on the comments here. You had just asked about the comments. What were you asking folks again?
I was just to say, have we hammered the point home clear? Are people seeing why this is an issue?
Are you sick of us talking yet? All right, so I'm gonna stop the screen share portion now. If there's anybody, me and Pete are super nice people. If there's anybody that would want us to go look at their page and try to diagnose problems live here on the call, if you're brave enough to do that, no judgment here. I have tons of websites that I've done this wrong. I'm working on going back and fixing it. We'd be happy to do that live here on the call. You can paste your URL in the YouTube chat here, and I'll do that. Otherwise, we did have, as I asked people to register for this webinar, I asked people if they had questions for Pete. We got a bunch of them in here, and I think there were some points we wanted to talk about the importance and things like that. So why don't we jump into that, Pete?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. So first question here, and I'm sorry I didn't copy everybody's name. So all of these are unattributed. Does changing the style of the H1 or H2 affect SEO?
No.
Simple.
Simple. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. The styling beyond, as I said earlier, beyond it being too small that it couldn't be read, or in the Lighthouse report, if you run that on your website, you might find it that certain elements are too close together, those kind of things. Other than it being potentially too small, if you go to like a few pixels, no, it doesn't affect SEO at all. What does affect the way Google interprets it is the correct structure of the tags throughout the page.
Perfect. All right. Does every page need an H1?
I would say every page you want to be indexed needs an H1. Your websites also need to be consistent throughout their appearance. So, the pages that I would say possibly don't need an H1 might be things like your privacy policy or your cookies policy or your blog index page, which, let's face it, then gets paginated to however you've said it. However, for consistency, like Kyle said earlier, 9 out of 10 websites essentially have their title in the hero section. That's in the H1. Yeah, then I would put an H1 on every page of the site.
I would say a page not having an H1 is going to be the exception, not the rule, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. All right, this is a good one. And so this one might have been good for visuals here, but this is kind of, we're going to have to talk a little bit about the DOM order and visually the order of things on the page, right? So the question that was asked, and it got asked in the comments here too, was how would you approach a heading in a side-by-side section where the headings are in the correct order on desktop, but on mobile, as the content is flipped due to the designer layout, they become in the wrong order, right? So let's say you have a section with a heading here and a heading here, but when you go into mobile, you want this one to go on top instead of this one to go on top, and now they're out of order that way. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. How do you handle that situation?
You make sure that the heading that you want is most important is the one that loads first in the DOM, which is exactly what Carl's just mentioned. So the DOM, I forgot what DOM stands for, but the DOM is the order of which things loads. Google views your page, or the search engines view your website as the source code. Therefore, it will come across things in the order that the source code loads, not in the order that the style sheet then tells things to display. So, as I say, other than things like display none, very small font sizes, Google isn't really looking at your styling at all. It's not got the time. It's not got the, the Google algorithm is trying to establish what your page is about and make sure you're following the rules of engagement, essentially. So outside of those parameters, it doesn't give two hoots what size things are, whether on the left or right, whether they're black, yellow, green, brown, blue, you name it. It just doesn't care because it's viewing them as source code.
Perfect. And there are ways in Elementor and Generate blocks, which I'm familiar with, to reverse the order of columns where you're not changing the DOM order in there. So you can reverse those things with Flexbox, with Grid. You can reverse the order of things without affecting the DOM. So you'd have to look at what page builder you're using and what you're doing to change the order on mobile. So if you're reversing the order of the columns, usually the left one's going to go on the top, the right one's going to go on the bottom, just naturally. But if you do reverse those, you're just going to have to look at how your page builder, however you build websites, how they handle that. All right. So here's a question that talks about kind of the importance of this. So they said, I understand how the proper use of heading tags affects accessibility, but I'm wondering how much of an actual impact it has on SEO anymore. Are the major search engines really concerned about the proper alignment of heading tags these days? Does it matter?
Right. So Kyle and I were talking a little bit about this in the little pre-chat show chat thing that we had, because we spent 20 minutes together before this.
We did.
That's how much planning went. No, I'm kidding.
That is how much planning went into this.
in all seriousness, I as I said to Carl beforehand, in order to make sure I knew that what I was saying was correct, I spent some time earlier this week actually doing some research back on this topic, because whilst I've dealt with all of this stuff for a long time, I haven't actually dove into the actual theory about it since I wrote Demystifying SEO, which was a course that launched a couple of years ago. So I wanted to make sure I was hot bang on this for you today.
You're so
so I
hot
put the
bang.
time in. I'm definitely hot bang. There's the quote. Why did I have to say that? Anyway, I came across an article in Search Engine Journal where around about the turn of the year, they had John Mueller on, who's one of the VCs of Google. And he went into this in quite good depth. Now, he didn't state this, but he indicated that Google may not be too fussed about H4s, 5s, and 6s, but that certainly getting the structure of your H1s to 3s did have an effect on SEO. So we've kind of heard it from the horse's mouth to a certain level that anyway. And then it's kind of, I kind of touched on this earlier. It's also, you're not going to rewrite your Google listings by getting this stuff right, but your job as a web developer, your job as a consultant to a business, your job for your own business is to get the best exposure for that business online. That's ultimately what people are coming to you for. That's why they want good websites. And in order to make Google understand what this website, be it yours or your clients, is about exactly, just as Kyle's example with his breakfast all being out of kilter, your job is to get that right. And by simply getting the headings right, you are helping Google understand that. You're spoon feeding more of this data to Google, which will lead to the possibility of featured snippets being open, to the understanding of particular sections of your page being indexed for long tail queries rather than just the main keyword that's listed in the H1, all of that kind of stuff. So you're not going to get oodles more traffic, but actually the quality of the traffic you do get could improve. That could lead to more sales for you or for your clients, depending on what the site is.
Yeah, and I think back to the example website where they had the little the counter, 90 clients served or whatever. They had that 90 as an H2, and then they had a bunch of customer testimonials as like H6s underneath it, right? Is that going to make you go from page 5 to page 1 fixing that? No, but you're certainly sending confusing messages to Google by saying these testimonials are related to this number 90. Now Google might just think, I don't know what the hell this page is talking about, So they're little things. And to me, okay, it's not going to completely move the needle. It's not going to transform your business. If you go back and fix all these errors that you've made, like I've gone back and fixed a ton of the ones I've made, we're not going to be rich and living on a beach somewhere. However, it takes almost no work to do it the right way than to do it the wrong way.
Yeah.
So if given the choice, I can do this the wrong way and potentially have some issues, especially on the accessibility side, but potentially with SEO, or I could do it the right way and have less issues, potentially some benefits. Or are you going to pick the wrong way?
So let's just run this real world example out a little bit further to make it specific for you as an agency owner. Let's say you've built the Coca-Cola website, and on that website, you've put a design and build credit at the bottom to your agency. On your homepage, you then have the clients, web design clients we've worked with or something. And then, in an H2, and then with H3s underneath, you've then got a structure of a few of your clients, including Coca-Cola. Joe Bloggs then comes along and finds the Coca-Cola website and says, I really like the look of that website. Maybe he doesn't notice your little design credit at the bottom. So he just Googles who built the Coca-Cola website or who did the Coca-Cola web design. Well, hey, presto, you've now just given to Google all the information it needs in the right structure to say that you built the Coca-Cola website. So it might not be a term that you are wanting to rank for. It might not be something that is even remotely connected to your business objectives in that kind of sense, in your marketing that you put out there. But in terms of actually finding the right information for the searcher, there might only be 3 people a month search for who did the web design for Coca-Cola. But actually, if that was you should be hoovering up those inquiries, right? So just get the damn thing right. That's all you need to do.
Certainly, the structure you laid out is going to make it easier for you to be found in Google for that search query than if Coca-Cola is just under a heading tag that says 90. Like that's going to be much different. All right.
Sorry. So, in my head, I put that entire example in the context of that website with
yeah. I was right there with you. I'm just translating for the folks at home. All right. So I think we've hammered this one home, but they asked, does it matter where on a page the headings H1, H2 are located, or if they're in a specific hierarchy? I think we've probably answered that. Yes.
Yeah, we've covered that one. Just make sure your heading one's loading somewhere near the top. But what you've got to ask yourself, the counterpart to that question is, if you have too much content before too many of your headings, then you've not really set the context. It's like putting the first chapter of the book before the cover. So you've got to get that balance right. That's not to say you can't have any content before them. Absolutely.
Sure. All right. I think this is a really good one. It's a simple question, but I think best practices matter here. So if we've previously used wrong headings, guilty myself, I got a bunch of live websites right now with issues. How do we go back and fix it? And I don't think they mean, I'm assuming here, I don't think they mean, how do we change this from the wrong order to the right order? How do we go about this so we don't damage any SEO we've already built up with maybe the improper structure we had?
So you see, as a coder, I would do this by creating classes with the sizes on that I wanted, and then going through and changing the tags to be the tags in the right place, but then applying the appropriate class. So like Carl was saying earlier, if you had an H3, but you wanted it to appear much smaller than that because it's a testimonial title or whatever, then you might have a class called, heading pretty small, right? And
please don't name your classes that. But yes, continue. I'm with you.
Hey, I work for an agency where we had very, very huge, extra large, right? So as long as there's a logic to it and you know what they are, it's kind of irrelevant. But
we'll save that argument for another day. But continue.
Okay.
Continue.
You're just such a coding OCD snob.
I'm a snob now. It's weird.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, but yeah, that's the way I would do it, because then you can go. You're not trying to fix these things on the fly. So the styles will be set when you basically hit publish on that page. So you would set the styles first. That might mean that you want to go and look, because you're doing these things in classes, you could set up a test page on the website that's never published, just a draft page, put a P tags in there for heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, and then apply the classes to the P tag, because you're only modifying the class. So you can make sure that those styles are set correctly before you actually go and change anything on a live page.
Yeah,
that would be my way to do
it. I think your point is, you could change all the order and visually not see any change on the page if you do this right, because you'll be doing all that styling with CSS, not with doing CSS to the ID, but to the class. So you could essentially go fix all these problems and your website looks the exact same, which is probably what you want. You're just gonna have to do that styling through classes with CSS rather than styling the HTML element.
That's exactly it. And you know what? The best thing about that is if your client then comes to you and says, yeah, you know what, all these kind of third level headings, these H3s, I think they're all a bit big. Can we reduce the size of them? It's one line of code. You go and change the pixel number. That is it. And it applies throughout the site.
The rim number, but you got
it's
it.
It's magic.
Oh, see, I'm snobby. I'm so snobby right now. All right.
Never speak to Kyle on a Friday. He gets so wound up before the weekend.
All right. Not sure if this is relevant, but what is the standard or best font sizes for each heading at all the varying screen sizes?
Oh, God, crikey. All the varying screen sizes.
This is an easy one. This is an easy one.
I'd normally look that, generally speaking, your H1 is the biggest, your H6 is the smallest. I'd never have a heading that's smaller than your paragraph text. personally, because I just think that looks a bit strange. Unless you're reserving it for a particular use case, like maybe tags on, over pictures or something, I guess. But typically I would use my H1s normally start somewhere around about 36 pixels or rem 2, and then they'd come down in relatively equal measure all the way down to what your base paragraph size is. Normally these things are calculated off your base paragraph size anyway.
Yeah, I would say my answer to this would be there's no right or wrong size for them, unless we get to the point that Pete said where it's so tiny it can't be read, and then Google would flag that as an issue. For SEO purposes, we don't really have any issue with that being whatever size. You're talking more design, I think, at that point, and maybe some accessibility too. All right. What holds more weight, Google's site structure of heading hierarchy or headlines for optimized search? So what's better, getting the structure right or the content right?
That's a really hard one. Google's move is always towards getting the right content in front of the right people. So I would say by a gnat's whisker, the content probably that's just to avoid me saying nuts ass on YouTube, but now I've gone and said it anyway. That's that probably takes it. But I would look, there's in some respects that question is simplifying the algorithm too much, because the algorithm is, as I say, is trying to get the right content in front of the right people. The reality is that when if you have the right content in place, but your structure's all to crap, but you then have 100 other websites that have a better structure than you, then in those decisions, the structure is going to come into play, to decide who's on page 1 versus page 3, 4, 5, etc. So you kind of need to do both and.
Yeah, I think if you gave me the choice, you said, Kyle, I'm going to give you this new website and it's going to have perfectly optimized content, but the structure is going to be complete crap. Or I'm going to give you a website with really great structure, but the content is terrible. I'm going to pick the one with bad structure and good content, because I think that's probably a better move than having horrible content, even if the structure's right. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
All right, let's see here. Do meta descriptions, this is kind of off topic, I guess, for this, but do meta descriptions still matter in terms of search? Also, is it best to build landing pages for specific products and services to cover specific geographic locations? This is way off topic, so let's be brief on this one.
All right, this is someone just trying to get a bit of consultancy out of this, isn't it? No, meta descriptions, in terms of your position in the search engines, meta descriptions have absolutely zero impact. It's been like that for years. However, what I would say about meta descriptions is it's 2 or 3 lines of Google real estate for you to convince the user to click on your result rather than the other ones. So I'd still set them, but you don't need to worry too much about getting keywords and stuff in there. That's that.
Indirect SEO results in the fact that if you have really good meta descriptions that get people to click on them, it improves your click-through rate and it improves the time spent on your website. And those things could have to do with your SEO. So better to have good descriptions than not have them. All right. Geographic specific landing pages.
You cannot create landing pages anymore that are the same as other pages on your site, just with a different location in them. Don't do that. Ever do that. Please never do that. Just don't do that. Did I get that point across?
It's clear. Very clear.
Really, what you need for geographics is you need to have the NAP details in the right places. If you think about like a restaurant chain, for example, they might have a website about who their restaurant is, sample of their menu, etc., etc. And then they'll have a tab that says locations, and under that they might have one in New York, one in Texas, one in Houston, one in LA, for example. And on those pages, they will then have the proper schema tags set up in order to get the location stuff put in and have all the right stuff set up in your Google business profile. But this call isn't about that, so that's all you get now.
Perfect. And he said NAP, name, address, phone number. All right. And then a question here from somebody watching in YouTube, Design Power says, SEM Rush says that they have, I'm guessing she's talking about he or she's talking about their agency. We have 45 pages with duplicate H1s and title tags. Is there a rule about how to structure the H1s versus the title tags?
No. Typically, though, you've got to remember that the title tag is what pulls through onto the search results, and the H1 isn't. So again, a bit like the comment I've just made with the meta descriptions, the title tag is your chance, your opportunity to get somebody to click on your link versus the other 15 or 17 that are on the page with you if you include the ads. So you need to make sure that that is optimized for click through versus the H1 that's on the page, which is optimized for for the keyword that you're trying to rank for, user intent, all that kind of stuff. So I read that John Mueller interview that I was talking about earlier. He did actually mention this, and he implied that there's nothing wrong with having identical title tags, even though SEMrush, I do use SEMrush every day, even though that does flag it as a warning that they're identical. He implied that's not technically an issue, but you just put yourself in the user's place. Sometimes, I find it's amazing how few people want to say that they want to rank for a search term and don't Google it themselves to find out what's already on page one. What have I got to beat in order to rank for this term? So just go and take a look. This might be one that you have to take on a turn-by-turn basis to see what the competition level is and what you're up against as to whether you really need to take action on it.
So in Pete's world, when he's building a website, are you using the same H1 as the title tag for the page, or are you using different ones?
The base stack has the base stack pulls the page title as the H1 and the title tag. Yes. We can then go and optimize that based on the keyword research, because we will have sold keyword research exercise to the client at the same time.
Whole new can of worms.
Yeah.
Well, Pete, I think we covered a lot of ground here today. I hope that we didn't have a lot of people talking about aha moments here in the chat, but hopefully this did help some people out. I know learning about all this myself has definitely helped me feel more proud of the websites I'm building. And I don't know, we have an element of like a craftsman who has pride in their work, right? So it makes me feel prouder of my work when I do these things. And I'm like, okay, I took the extra 2 seconds it took to do that right. And now I can pull up this little browser extension and my page looks nice and clean.
Look, there is one thing we haven't talked about here, which is maybe a good place to close, which is, let's say somebody's come and bought a website from you and you've charged them, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 grand for it. And you've not done this stuff, right? And then they come across somebody that says, hey, I can do SEO for you. And they do a crawl of the site and find that all the headings are out of order. Are you prepared to have the discussion when they come back to you that says, I paid you $6,500 for this website. Why didn't you do it correctly? Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. And that could be said for probably a lot of the things we're doing. I mean, this is one of those things though, like we're never going to be perfect at this job. We're never going to build a perfect website. The perfect website doesn't exist, right? All we can do is keep learning these things, keep attending conversations like that, picking up a new trick here or there, and then putting it in your toolbox and then using it, right? So website from now on, you might remember this call about, shit, I better not pick that heading because it looks right. I better put it in the right order. And if we've drilled that through your head today, I think that would be a success for us in this call, obviously, but it just puts another tool in your tool belt, which I think is huge.
Yeah, and even if you don't go back and revisit your old websites, but from today, you now build them like this, that's still a win in my eyes. We've done our duty to the community to educate you on this stuff, and there's no problem in that. If you don't know what you don't know, that's the reality. So, but now if you know it, just make sure you act upon it. That's always really saying.
And I'm not trying to be in a glass house throwing stones. Go audit any of my websites. You're going to find plenty of problems. I'm sure of it. And I'm going to continue to do my best to keep improving on those things as I go. And I think that's the attitude we all got to take, right? Nobody's going to do it perfectly, but you can always do it better than you did it before. So that's great. All right, Pete, I want to hand it over to you. Why don't you tell people where they can find out more about you, learn from you, follow you around social media, shed in the backyard of your house, and come play on those drums? Anything you want to tell them?
Yeah, I maybe won't give my personal address out on this, but yeah. So you can find links to me over at peteeveritt.com. That's where the podcast is housed. There's actually a shiny new peteeveritt.com website coming very soon to a server near you. But yeah, you can find me there. Alternatively, go and visit seohive.co, and that's the white label service.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate it, Pete. It is always a good time chatting with you. I appreciate you entertaining all these questions and going over all this and putting up with me mostly, because I know that's not easy to do. So congratulations. You did it again, my friend.
No worries, especially on a Friday. You doubled my fee for this one, haven't you?
No doubt. I know we've lost almost everyone now, but if you didn't hit like on this video, if you would hit like, that definitely helps us out. I will post about this inside of our group. If you're not part of our group, you can go to the adminbar.com/group. That'll forward you on to our Facebook group. I'll put notes about all the things we talked about here, links to everything, so you can get to all that information. This replay will stay live on YouTube for the foreseeable future, so you can always come back and reference it if you need to. You can hit the subscribe button. That wouldn't hurt my feelings either. I'm out of here. Thank y'all. Thanks everybody for coming today. Thanks, Pete, for participating. We'll do this again soon.
See you later.
All right. Bye-bye.